Hey guys, I'm back. I'm doing it, or at least I'm trying. Like I said in the last video, I'm actually going to try my best to keep making videos for this channel. Maybe not quite as frequently as, one every other day or so, but I'm going to try to do like once a week and see how that goes. But today, I wanted to go out for another drive and discuss something that I've gotten quite a few questions about from friends and from followers on my car account on Instagram, and that is the cost breakdown of my cross-country trip with my E92 M3. Like I explained in the last video, and like a lot of you may know, I did find a car in Dallas, Texas in September, and I had to have it, so I booked a flight one way, picked up the car in Dallas and drove it home. I do live in New England, north of Boston, so not quite full cross-country drive, but I think it's close enough to call it that. I'd say it was 2,200 miles or so. I didn't take a direct route home. I did Dallas to somewhere in the middle of Arkansas the first night. I was trying to do Nashville, but that was a little too ambitious. It was quite far. And then from there, I went kind of directly east instead of north, across the tail of the Dragon, and then stayed at a friend's place in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then on the third day, it was a straight shot up Charlotte to what was supposed to be Boston, but didn't quite make it the whole way. Ended up staying the night just north of New York City in Connecticut because it was a lot of driving. If you're like me, any car guy in general, I can almost guarantee you that you've thought about, buying a potential dream car or a fun car in a faraway place and flying out and getting to drive it home as opposed to just getting it shipped to you. It's a much more enjoyable way of collecting your new-to-you car, and it also could save you some money, because especially right now, shipping for cars is absolutely insane. It seems to have cooled down a little bit, but at least 4 to 6 months ago, when it was at its peak with fuel costs and everything, it was ludicrously expensive to get a car shipped. And forget about closed transport. That was just for open, shared trailer. If you want closed transport, you're looking at multiple thousands, if not up into the 5 figures, just to get your car shipped to you. So yeah, I wanted to go for a little drive today and actually break down the costs of my cross-country drive. So I spent some time going through bank statements and writing out the total cost of the trip, and then I broke it down a little bit further into different categories, flights one way, hotels, gas, food, etc. So I figured that I would get that list out for you guys and go over it, because I'm sure some people are curious. Some people have thought about doing this. They just don't know if they can afford it, or if it makes financial sense, or if they can find the time to do it. But yeah, so my expenses were as follows. One thing I actually do want to preface before going over my expenses was the shipping quote that I received, because I wasn't dead set on wanting to fly out and drive the car home. It is a big commitment, both financially and time-wise. Luckily, I'm fortunate enough to have a job where I can work remote if I need to. So that wasn't a huge factor for me. I didn't need to be in the office, so that helped a lot in my decision. But the shipping quote itself that I got from a pretty reliable source was roughly $1,300 to $1,400 door to door. Obviously, it can vary a tiny bit depending on fuel and stuff like that. But so I knew that to make this make sense, I didn't want to be spending more than that. And if I broke even, that was totally fine, because in my opinion, it's much more fun to travel, see new places, get some time behind the wheel of your new car, and get familiar with it, as opposed to just having the car dropped off at your front door. So yeah, that was my baseline. And I started doing some research into flights and stuff like that, and this is what I found. First thing to note is if you're flying to Dallas specifically, do not wait until the last minute to book the flight. I think I booked my flight 2 days or 3 days prior because I still wasn't 100% committed to doing this. And so I waited, which unfortunately cost me quite a bit more because that route is a pretty popular weekly business trip route for businessmen and women that work in between those two cities. And I happen to be flying out first thing on a Monday morning, which is a very popular time for work. So a few weeks prior, I had looked at the pricing and it was like $100, maybe 150 on the high end to go one way. And then, 2 to 3 days prior, I ended up paying $389 one way with a layover in JFK Airport. So yeah, less than ideal, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me. It is a pretty penny to be flying one direction in economy for nearly $400. But I was kind of committed to doing it at that point, and I just figured, you know what, when's the next time I'm gonna have the opportunity to do this? Might as well. So yeah, $389.61 to be exact for the flight. So landed in Dallas, I believe it was noon or so, and I knew that I was gunning for Nashville, Tennessee same night. So I wanted to get to the dealership as soon as possible, sign all the paperwork, get in the car, and go. They did, of course, give me a full tank of fuel, which in this day and age is a blessing because gas is so expensive. So that helped a little bit on the cost. So yes, as you can imagine, the flight was actually not the most expensive part of this trip. It was, of course, fuel. I got really lucky and ended up doing this trip like when gas has been the most expensive it's ever been. Luckily, the first half of the trip down south in Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, gas was actually way more affordable than it is up here. I was averaging 290 to 310 for 93 octane down there, which is actually really good. Whereas up here it was between $5 and $6 at the time, so it was absolutely absurd. My total expenditures for fuel for this trip was $431.27. And that is for roughly 2,200 miles of driving, which it's not great, but when you think about it, it does get you pretty far. I was honestly prepared to be spending a lot more than that because I was expecting the fuel prices down south to be worse. So it wasn't too bad. It was, manageable, so to speak. The next most expensive category, of course, would be hotels. Now, I was lucky enough to only have to spend hotel money for 2 nights out of the 3. I do have a friend in Charlotte, North Carolina that put me up for the night, so that helped with cost. I know Charlotte isn't really on a direct route back to Boston, but he was offering me a free place to stay and I hadn't seen him in quite a while, so figured why not, let's go visit Charlotte. But for 2 nights of hotels, one in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas, and one in Greenwich, Connecticut area, I did spend $338.82. I think I probably could have done a little bit better on those. Looking back at the bank statements, they were actually more expensive than I remember. Might have been some hidden fees or something added on after the fact, but one hotel was about $192, and then the other one was the difference between those two, whatever it is. I would say it was definitely worth it. When you spend 12 plus hours a day in the car by yourself, it can be really taxing, really exhausting. There's no one to help you with the drive. So to be able to pull over, get a bed, shower, free breakfast, it was 100% worth it. Also, it's just nice to give the car a break because, that many miles in 3 days is a lot on the car, and being able to pull over and give it a break, so to speak, for 8 to 10 hours that's fine by me. My next most expensive category, I guess you could say one of the least expensive because there's only 2 categories left, was food. I spent a grand total of $127.77 on food, and that is not really with me spending time at nice restaurants or anything like that. It was mainly just like quick pub food or drive-throughs or stuff like that, just to keep keep me on the road, keep moving. Obviously, depending on your personal preference, you can spend a lot more on food, you can spend a lot less on food. I wasn't really trying to save money. I knew that going on a trip like this was not really lavish, but more of like a luxury to be able to do something like this, so I didn't really care for penny pinching. But $127 on food for 3/4 of the way across the country is totally fine by me. My last category of expenses is just miscellaneous stuff like car chargers that I picked up at gas stations or Target, and that came out to a grand total of $69.30. All of these expenses do add up to a grand total of $1,356.77, which, if you remember my quote for shipping, which was between $1,300 and $1,400, this was right on the money. I wouldn't say I saved money. I wouldn't say that I spent extra money to do this, which is a drawing factor to me because there were no mechanical problems with the car. I got to see some new parts of the country. I got to drive the tail of the dragon, which has always been on my bucket list. Probably not going to go back there. Check that off. Don't need to go back. So yeah, at the end of the day, I would 100% recommend doing this to someone else if they were to ask me. I've made some great memories with the car that I had just purchased, one that I've been wanting for ages, and I was lucky enough to have no mechanical issues or anything like that that would add to the cost or complications of getting the car home. And having the opportunity to say that I finally did get to, travel across the country for my dream car, so to speak, and drive it home was just awesome. It got to the point at the end of my search for cars that I started to look for cars further away so that I would have the opportunity to do this. But also, being in New England, cars from the south are just way cleaner 9 out of 10 times. I don't have to deal with salt and winters up here like we do. So yeah, all in all, it really worked out, and I would definitely recommend it. Another thing to note is that I do think this trip could very easily be done for 75% of the cost, maybe even less, maybe even half the cost. Like I said, the flights do go up dramatically if you wait until the last minute. And I'm assuming you could find some deals on hotels if you looked a little harder than I did. But like I said, I wasn't trying to pinch pennies anywhere or cut costs. I just, this type of trip for me was a luxury, so to speak, and so I just, if I needed to spend the money on something, I'd just spend the money on something and not worry about it or not dwell on it too much. So yes, if you want to do something like this on a budget, it's definitely doable. You just have to plan out, well in advance so you can save on things like flights. So yeah, I think that's gonna wrap up my video for today. Like I said in my last, I'm still not sure if I want to make this strictly BMW content or if I want to incorporate all the cool cars that I'm with on a pretty regular basis. Probably leaning towards the latter, just because I love anything that's remotely cool that has to do with cars, and I like to share that with you guys. So yeah, if you guys have any further questions about my trip or how much it cost or anything like that, just leave a comment below. But otherwise, yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll be back with another video soon.